This is a very interesting article on worldboxingnews.net. It is the top 30 worldwide pay-per-view boxing bouts of all time, adjusted for inflation. So it gives you the pay-per-view revenue generated from fights that happened in the 70s, but it adjusts them for inflation. So it gives you the equivalent dollar amount in today's money. So back then, obviously, a dollar was worth a lot more than it is today. So that's why you adjust for inflation. Anyway, let's get to it. I'm not going to go through the whole list. I'm just going to pick out a few notable pay-per-views here. There's a lot of Manny Pacquiao and there's a lot of Floyd Mayweather in the top 30, as you would expect. But the number one might actually surprise some of you people, particularly you newer boxing fans, and it will give you a glimpse into how popular certain other fighters were back in the days, how massive they were long before the days of the internet. If you'd had the internet today, when some of the fighters from the 70s and 80s, let's say some of the fighters from the 70s and 80s were around today in the internet age, they would have done pay-per-view numbers beyond anything you can imagine. All right, because they were doing crazy pay-per-view numbers before the internet, before they were able to market themselves to all these different territories around the world. But anyway, let's get to it here. And to be fair, there is actually an argument that pay-per-view was more lucrative back in the days because there wasn't as much things to watch on television. And it was easier for a fighter to become prominent if he was world champion because there were fewer world champions. So I do take that argument into account as well. But whatever the case may be, let's have a look at some of these figures. So we got Pacquiao Marquez 4 with $90 million. That's what it generated. Quite a few Pacquiaos in here. We got Mike Tyson, Bruce Seldon at number 23. $102 million adjusted for inflation. De La Hoya Pacquiao, $116 million. Tyson Holyfield 1, $150 million. Tyson Spinks, $150 million. Ali Ken Norton 3, $147 million. There's Ray Leonard against Hagler, $130 million. Now we're getting into more familiar territory with Mayweather versus Canelo, $160 million. Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton, the same. Now this one is significant here. Number 8, Mike Tyson versus Peter McNeely. You see, Peter McNeely was somebody who very few people outside of extremely hardcore boxing fans had ever heard of. Peter McNeely was, I don't want to call him a hype job because there wasn't really much hype around him. Maybe in his local area, Boston, where he's from. But outside of that, Peter McNeely was, I guess, a contender who had fed a steady diet of journeymen. And when he was chosen as Mike Tyson's comeback opponent after Tyson came out of prison, nobody had heard of McNeely. He was a massive underdog. Most people expected the fight to end in one round, believe it or not, but yet the pay-per-view still sold the equivalent, or still made the equivalent of $177 million for Mike Tyson versus a no-hoper. Mike Tyson versus somebody who most people had never heard of. That is incredible. Right? That shows you where Tyson mania was at. That Tyson can come out of prison, fight a complete no-hoper who no one's ever heard of, and generate $177 million, or the equivalent of in today's money. So bear that in mind. Tyson was a phenom back in the days in terms of his popularity. And he was only really eclipsed by one man. And we'll get to him in a second. And I'm talking about in terms of popularity. He was only eclipsed by one man, really. Some people would say two men, but, I would say one man. Oscar De La Hoya, number 7 versus Mayweather, $200 million. Hang on, didn't we see De La Hoya Mayweather before? Mayweather Canelo. Oh, that was De La Hoya Pacquiao, wasn't it? Yeah, that was De La Hoya Pacquiao. Okay. So De La Hoya Mayweather, $200 million. Tyson Holyfield 2, $281 million. Ali versus Frazier, the first fight, the equivalent of $300 million. Now, to argue against the point I made earlier with regards to back in the days, there were less champions and there were less things to watch. Therefore, you could expect pay-per-view numbers to be higher. At the same time, people back then didn't have as big a disposable income as people do today. People today have got big disposable incomes. So, I mean, certain things were cheaper back in the days in terms of like housing. You know, to have your own house was a lot more affordable back in the 60s and, 70s, 50s than it is today in the United States and in the UK. And there were certain other things that are more affordable. But in terms of disposable income for going out, going to watch a movie, going to get a meal somewhere, buying gadgets and gizmos, people have got a greater disposable income for those things today because those things are relatively cheap. But anyway, Ali Frazier, the first one, $300 million, the equivalent of in today's money. That was back in March of 1971, and that's fifth on this list. Now, second, third, and fourth place are all tied. So you got Mayweather Pacquiao, $500 million, Mayweather Conor McGregor, $500 million, and that's incredible right there. I know McGregor was not a credible professional boxer, but he was a very big name in MMA. So not really that surprising that he can do $500 million. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, 3, The Thriller in Manila, also $500 million. So these are all tied at $500 million. Muhammad Ali, if he was fighting today, would be the biggest pay-per-view sensation you've ever seen. And he probably still was the biggest pay-per-view sensation ever seen, because as you see at number 1, you've got Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman, $510 million in pay-per-view revenue, adjusted for inflation. Incredible. That's how big Muhammad Ali was. The fight wasn't even in the United States. It was in Zaire, in the Congo. And it generated this much money in terms of pay-per-view revenue. Absolutely incredible. Now, there's also this Wikipedia article here, which I'll direct you guys to. And I'm struggling to understand the numbers here. Actually, no, I'm not struggling to understand the numbers. I get it. But yeah, let's have a look at this. It is a list of sportsmen with the highest pay-per-view sales. Muhammad Ali is way above everybody else. And this is units sold. So this is not money. This is not $162 million. This is units, the number of actual pay-per-view transactions that were made for Muhammad Ali fights. 162,944,000. That's crazy. 162 million people bought Muhammad Ali pay-per-views, or nearly 163 million people bought Ali pay-per-views. Most of them were on closed circuit theater TV. So back in the 70s, it was far more common to go to a movie theater, as they call it in the United States, or a cinema in the UK, to watch a pay-per-view than it was at home. You see, Muhammad Ali only sold 790,000 home pay-per-views, because that back then, home pay-per-view wasn't a really big thing. So yeah, most of them were cinema pay-per-views. Joe Frazier, the second highest in terms of pay-per-view sales. Third was George Foreman. This shows you what an incredible time the 1970s was for boxing, particularly heavyweight boxing. These heavyweights really captured the imagination of the American public and the world, really. In fourth place, you got Mayweather. And as you can see, in terms of the closed circuit theater TV, right, the cinema pay-per-views, Mayweather's only done 223,000. The vast majority of his pay-per-view sales are home pay-per-view sales. 28,867,000. And this also shows you how much more expensive Mayweather's pay-per-views were compared to Ali's pay-per-views, because Ali obviously sold a hell of a lot more units than Mayweather sold. But Mayweather was not too far behind Ali in terms of money generated. Okay, you got Triple H here. See, this is sportsman. This is not specifically boxing. It's sportsman. But it's pretty impressive that boxers, out of all the sports out there, but obviously we're talking about individual sports, so there are not that many individual sports, but it's still pretty impressive that boxers are able to generate this much money. Got Triple H there. Manny Pacquiao, he's not too far down the list. Mike Tyson, in terms of units sold, 16,720,000. Home pay-per-views, 920,000. Closed circuit pay-per-views. So a total of 16,640,000. Now, with Mike Tyson, he didn't really, well, he had a few stints of inactivity in his career, like when he went to prison, but so did Muhammad Ali. You know, Muhammad Ali was out for 3 years. Mike Tyson was out for 3 years because of his jail term, which will, account for why his total units sold are not as high as some of the others, but still very respectable. John Cena, Conor McGregor, The Rock, Undertaker, De La Hoya, etc. Anyway, I urge you guys to go and have a look at this article right here in more depth. Top 30 worldwide pay-per-views in boxing. And also this right here. It does give you an indication of how phenomenally popular people like Muhammad Ali were back in the days. And this one especially also gives you an indication of how phenomenally popular Mike Tyson was. I mean, you look at the big pay-per-views. Ali and Foreman were both big names. Mayweather Pacquiao, big names. Mayweather McGregor, big names. Ali Frazier, big names. Ali Frazier, big names. You know, Tyson and Holyfield were big names. But Tyson and McNeely, Tyson's a big name, McNeely's not. But Tyson still makes the top 10. Fighting someone no one's ever heard of. That is what, that's how revered Mike Tyson was by the public. And that's how much hype was surrounding him. And I don't mean hype as in he didn't deserve it, necessarily. But what I'm saying is the amount of excitement that there was in the world of boxing for Mike Tyson is demonstrated here by this pay-per-view against McNeely. The fact that he was able to sell this much against an opponent like that. Incredible. So have a look at these for yourselves, people, and let me know what you think. All right? It's happening. I'm out.
Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.